They told Captain Zara Idris that the mountainous border between Afghanistan and Pakistan was completely mapped, that every possible crossing route had been documented by decades of military operations, and that Taliban fighters used known passes that coalition forces monitored constantly. Intelligence analysts said there were no undiscovered routes, that satellite imagery and drone surveillance had eliminated geographical secrets. But during a mission to track a high-value target, who kept vanishing without crossing any monitored location, Zara would discover an ancient smuggling route hidden beneath 2,000 years of geological shifts, and prove that sometimes the most valuable intelligence came not from technology, but from listening to stories that everyone else dismissed as folklore. Zara Idris was 34 when she deployed to Afghanistan as an intelligence officer with the British Army. She was tall and lean, with dark skin and sharp features that reflected her Somali heritage. She had a degree in archaeology and a graduate qualification in geospatial intelligence, a combination that made her unusual among military officers who typically focused on one discipline or the other. She grew up in Birmingham, where her parents had settled after fleeing Somalia in the early 90s. Her father worked as a taxi driver, her mother as a nurse. They wanted stability for their children, safety, normalcy. But Zara inherited something from both parents that would not accept ordinary paths. Her father's restless curiosity about how places connected to each other, and her mother's methodical approach to solving problems that seemed impossible. Zara discovered archaeology during university, fascinated by how landscapes held secrets that modern people had forgotten. Ancient trade routes, hidden tunnels, structures buried beneath centuries of sediment. She learned that geography was not static. Rivers changed course, mountains eroded, human construction altered terrain in ways that persisted long after the builders were gone. She specialized in geospatial analysis, using modern technology to find ancient patterns. The military recruited her during graduate school. They needed intelligence officers who understood terrain not just tactically but historically, who could look at a landscape and see what it used to be, what purposes it had served, what secrets it might still hide. Zara joined at 26 and spent 8 years working intelligence operations before deploying to Afghanistan. If you believe these unconventional stories of service deserve recognition, please subscribe. We honor those whose unique perspectives changed outcomes in unexpected ways. Zara's fascination with hidden routes started with her father's stories. Ahmed Idris had been a trader in Somalia before the Civil War, traveling between coastal cities and interior villages along routes that only locals knew. He told Zara that official maps showed roads and highways, but the real network of movement was invisible to outsiders. Smugglers' paths, seasonal routes that appeared when rivers dried, trails through terrain that looked impassable but had been used for centuries. He explained that powerful people controlled official routes because those routes generated taxes and allowed surveillance. But poor people, traders, and anyone who needed to move without official permission used the hidden network. Those routes were passed down through families, protected as valuable secrets. When the war destroyed Somalia, Ahmed had used those hidden routes to escape with his family. The journey took months, moving through terrain that government forces and militias did not monitor because they did not know the routes existed. That knowledge saved their lives. Zara grew up understanding that geography had two layers, the official version that appeared on maps, and the hidden version that existed in the knowledge of people who actually moved through landscapes. Archaeology taught her to find evidence of that hidden layer. Ancient roads that modern maps ignored, trade routes that connected civilizations in ways that contradicted historical assumptions, underground passages built for purposes lost to time. When Zara deployed to Afghanistan, she saw the same pattern. Coalition forces relied on maps that showed roads, valleys, mountain passes. They monitored known routes and assumed they had comprehensive coverage, but local people moved through the landscape in ways that did not appear on any military map. They knew paths that predated modern borders, routes that smugglers had used for generations. Zara believed that somewhere in that hidden geography was intelligence that could change operations. She just needed to find it. The operational problem was straightforward but frustrating. Taliban commander Hamza Durrani kept disappearing from Afghanistan and reappearing weeks later without crossing any monitored border location. Coalition forces tracked him to areas near the Pakistan border, then lost him completely. When he resurfaced, he was inside Pakistan, having crossed without being detected. Intelligence analysts were baffled. Satellite surveillance covered the border comprehensively. Drones monitored known passes. Ground sensors detected movement along smuggling routes. Yet Durrani crossed repeatedly without triggering any detection system. The prevailing theory was that he had insider help, someone providing information about surveillance gaps or temporarily disabling sensors. Investigations focused on finding the leak. But Zara had a different theory. She believed Durrani was not evading surveillance. He was using a route that no one was watching because no one knew it existed. She presented this theory to her commanding officer, Major Philip Rains. He was skeptical. The border had been studied extensively. Every pass, every valley, every possible crossing point had been mapped and analyzed. Modern surveillance technology left no gaps large enough for a high-value target to move through undetected. Zara argued that modern mapping assumed current geography. But landscapes changed. Earthquakes altered terrain. Erosion created new passages. Human construction from centuries ago still existed beneath the surface. If an ancient route existed that modern surveys had not identified, it could provide exactly the kind of crossing point that would appear impossible. Rains listened, but remained unconvinced. He told Zara to focus on conventional intelligence analysis. Searching for theoretical ancient routes was not a productive use of limited resources. Zara accepted his decision, but continued her research independently. She began studying historical records of the region, looking for references to routes that no longer appeared on modern maps. Zara spent her off-duty hours digging through archives. She reviewed British colonial survey records from the 19th century, Soviet military maps from the 80s, even older sources, accounts from traders and travelers who had crossed the region in previous centuries. Most references described routes that still existed, but occasionally she found mentions of paths that did not correspond to anything on modern maps. One reference particularly interested her. A British survey from 1891 mentioned a passage through the mountains near Torkham that local traders used, but that the survey team could not locate. The report suggested the passage might be partially underground, carved through rock by ancient engineers, but the team had insufficient time to investigate thoroughly. Zara cross-referenced this with geological surveys of the region. The area had experienced significant seismic activity over the past century. Terrain had shifted, valleys had changed, but underground structures, if they existed, might have survived. She felt the familiar tension between confidence and doubt. Was she pursuing real intelligence or chasing folklore because it fit her archaeological background? Was her father's influence making her see hidden routes where none existed? But she kept thinking about Durrani. He was crossing somewhere. If conventional surveillance was not detecting him, then the answer had to be unconventional. Either he had developed technology that defeated modern sensors, which seemed unlikely, or he was using geography that modern technology was not watching. Zara decided to request permission to investigate the area mentioned in the 1891 survey. It would require fieldwork, resources, and time. Rains would likely refuse, but she had to try. Zara prepared a comprehensive briefing. She presented historical evidence, geological analysis, and a specific hypothesis. An underground passage existed near Torkham that connected Afghanistan and Pakistan through terrain that appeared impassable on the surface. She argued that investigating this possibility cost relatively little compared to continued failure to interdict Durrani. Rains reviewed her presentation carefully. He was not dismissive, but he was cautious. He said that field operations in that area were dangerous. If Zara was wrong, they would have exposed personnel to risk for no gain. If she was right but the route was no longer passable, the result was the same. Zara acknowledged the risks, but argued that Durrani's continued success at crossing undetected was already costing lives. If he was moving weapons, coordinating attacks, or meeting with leadership in Pakistan, then stopping those movements justified investigating unlikely possibilities. Rains made a decision. He would authorize a limited reconnaissance. Zara could take a small team to the area and conduct a ground survey. She had 72 hours. If she found evidence of the passage, they would escalate. If not, she would return to conventional analysis. Zara assembled a team, 4 soldiers with mountaineering experience, a geologist from the coalition forces, and an interpreter who spoke Pashto and knew the local area. They deployed to a forward operating base near Torkham and began their investigation. The area was mountainous, rocky, and had seen recent Taliban activity. Moving through it was slow and dangerous. Zara used historical coordinates from the 1891 survey as a starting point, but over a century of geological change meant those coordinates were approximate at best. For 2 days they found nothing. The team searched terrain that looked completely solid. No caves, no openings, nothing that suggested underground passages. Several soldiers began questioning whether this was a productive use of time. Then the interpreter, a local man named Farid, mentioned that his grandfather had told stories about the old traders' route. He said the entrance was hidden deliberately, covered with stones that looked natural but could be moved. He had never seen it himself, but remembered his grandfather describing it as being near a distinctive rock formation that resembled a split tooth. Zara asked if he could find that formation. Farid said he would try. They found the rock formation late on the 3rd day. It was exactly as Farid described, a large stone that erosion had split vertically, creating a gap that from certain angles looked like a tooth. Near the base of this formation, partially buried beneath smaller stones and sediment, was an opening. The opening was small, less than a meter high, easily missed if you were not looking specifically for it. The stones around it appeared natural, but when Zara examined them closely, she saw that they had been placed deliberately. Someone had constructed a concealed entrance. They cleared the stones carefully. Behind them was a passage carved into the rock, descending at a shallow angle into darkness. The walls showed tool marks, evidence of human construction. This was not a natural cave. Someone had engineered this. Zara and 2 soldiers entered the passage with lights and surveying equipment. The passage descended for roughly 50 meters, then leveled out. The air was cold and stale, but breathable. The passage continued forward into darkness. They mapped as they went, documenting dimensions and direction. The passage ran roughly east-west, the direction you would travel to cross from Afghanistan into Pakistan. After nearly a kilometer of underground travel, the passage began ascending. Eventually they reached another opening. This one partially collapsed but passable. They emerged on the Pakistani side of the border, in terrain that was technically across the international boundary, but in an area so remote and mountainous that it saw no official monitoring. Someone using this route could cross between countries completely undetected. Zara had found it. An ancient smuggling route, possibly 2,000 years old, that modern surveillance had never identified because satellites and drones could not see underground, and because the entrances were deliberately concealed. The team documented everything, photographed the route and marked coordinates. Then they returned through the passage to the Afghan side and reported their findings. The intelligence changed operations immediately. Coalition forces established covert surveillance on both entrances to the passage. Within 2 weeks they detected Durrani attempting to cross. He was intercepted, detained, and provided intelligence that led to disrupting several planned Taliban operations. Investigation revealed that the passage had been used by smugglers for centuries, with knowledge of its existence passed down through specific families. Durrani had learned about it through tribal connections and had been using it for nearly a year to move between Afghanistan and Pakistan without detection. The discovery had broader implications. Zara's methods, combining historical research with modern geospatial analysis, led to investigations of other border areas. 3 additional undocumented crossing routes were identified using similar techniques. Each discovery closed gaps in surveillance that hostile forces had been exploiting. Zara received a commendation for the operation, though the details remained classified. Major Rains admitted he had underestimated the value of historical research in modern intelligence work. He recommended that similar methodologies be applied to other operational theaters. Zara completed her deployment and returned to the UK. She was promoted and assigned to develop training programs that taught intelligence officers to think beyond current geography, to consider how landscapes had changed and what hidden structures might still exist beneath modern terrain. She eventually left the military and returned to academic archaeology, but her work bridged both fields. She published research on the intelligence value of historical geography, teaching a new generation of archaeologists and intelligence officers that the past was not dead. It was buried, and sometimes what was buried mattered more than what was visible on the surface. In her office at the university, Zara keeps a photograph from Afghanistan. It shows the split rock formation that led her team to the ancient passage. She tells her students that intelligence work is about asking questions that no one else is asking. Everyone was looking at satellites and sensors, sophisticated technology watching the surface, but no one was looking beneath it, where 2,000 years of human movement had left paths that still connected places in ways modern maps could never show. She found the route that no one knew existed because she understood something that technology alone could never reveal, that landscapes remember, and if you know how to listen, they tell you their secrets.